Hello everyone, it's Helen from the Squiggly Careers podcast, and I wanted to give you a super quick summary of this week's episode, which is all about relationships. It is the fourth and final episode in our Squiggly Skills Outside Inside series, where we looked at some of the skills that you can develop outside of work that can help you to improve your impact and performance inside of work. And relationships are a big part of that. We spend more time with the people at work than anyone else in our lives. So actually, the more that we can develop effective relationship building skills, the more that can support us inside of work too. Now, this isn't an area that Sarah and I are particularly expert in, so we've borrowed some brilliance from two books, which is what we use and talk about on the episode. Sarah dives into attachment theory, but a particularly practical take on it, because she gets into an attachment theory workbook. And actually, she talks about some of the insights of attachment theory, but in the episode, we also talk about a free workbook. You can get a 28-page workbook if you really want to get into attachment theory. That might be a free and useful resource for you. Find out more about that on the podcast. And then I talk about a brand new book by the brilliant Amy Gallo, which is all about getting along, how you can get along with anybody, even difficult people. And, you know, we all meet some of those people inside and outside of work. So lots of great practical stuff for work, but some things that you can apply outside of work too, which I found particularly useful. Just a couple of insights in case it helps you. The first around attachment theory. In fact, let me just give you a definition of attachment theory in case you have never come across this before. I've written it down on a post-it note because I can't remember it. So attachment theory is the stress that people do or do not experience when they are dependent on others in a relationship. So the stress that people do or not experience when they're dependent on others in a relationship. And what Sarah talks about on the podcast is sort of three types of attachment preferences or profiles that people have. So some people are secure in their attachment style, which is actually a very healthy place to be. But most people actually veer towards either insecure and anxious or insecure and avoidant. And where you naturally have a preference can really affect the quality of the relationships that you build with other people inside and outside of work. So she just helps to bring that to life and shares a few of her own reflections and a few different ideas for action all around attachment theory. So hopefully you'll find that useful, particularly if you're interested in a bit of psychology around how relationships are built. And then me and some of the insights that I took away from Amy's book. Absolutely loads, to be honest. It's a very practical book. But one of the things that stuck with me is how bias affects the relationships that you build. And Amy talks about two particular biases which are worth watching out for. The first is affinity bias, which is where we build lots of relationships with people that look a bit like us. And looking a bit like us could be in lots of different ways, literally physical appearances, but it could also be life experiences or geographic experiences. And if we have too many people who think and look a bit like us, then we might not be building the most diverse relationships that could help us with our development. So it's interesting to think about, are you operating with a bit of an echo chamber? The second is confirmation bias. So I think this is interesting. I probably related to it a bit too much. It's where you've made a decision about somebody in your mind, personally or professionally, and then you look for information that supports the decision you've already made. So maybe there is somebody that you're going, that's just not a person that I think I can work with very well. That I just don't get on with people like that. What you will then look for, based on confirmation bias, is information that supports the decision that you've already made. So it might be that you've written someone off and you're not giving them a chance to build that relationship. And we should be really aware of how confirmation bias might be getting in the way of building better relationships. So we found it a very interesting podcast to record. I've had some feedback from people that have had an early listen that it was really insightful. So hopefully you might find it interesting too. And after you've listened, you can take action by downloading the Podsheet. So the Podsheet is available for all of our episodes. It summarizes some of the key points, some of the key quotes, and the ideas for action. And it has some coach yourself questions in that can help you reflect as well. You will always find that in the show notes if you listen on Apple, but maybe you listen on a different platform. You can just get that from our website at amazingif.com. And if you ever can't find it, or if you have any feedback for us, you can email us. We're Helen and Sarah at squigglycareers.com. But thank you so much for listening and supporting all things Squiggly.